Hello! Here you catch me stood in front of the new Prismatic range from Shin for this year. In this vid we're going to have a comparative look at them so you as a rider can get some perspective on where your sweet spot in the range will be. I've done some other individual vids for these 5 boards, so I suggest you have a look at them when you find something that tickles your fancy. It's been 10 years since the first Monk hit us, the point at which kiteboarding kind of stuck up its ears and said, wow, this is new. Last year the brand was voted best board brand in the industry, so it's been quite a journey. Certainly here in the UK, Mr. Shin's twins are revered, and rightly so. They bring a level of performance that really resonates with the public. He's got a knack of hitting the sweet spot down at the local beach, but kiteboarding being what it is, that sweet spot is spread across quite a wide range of models. Broadly speaking, each board has a party trick and does something that another can't, and here we're going to look at the core of the range. I guess you could say the main 5 models: Villion, Monk, Ronson, Absinthe and ADHD. This week of testing we've had wind nearly every day, from barely strong enough to stay upwind to one crazy day with peaks of over 45 knots, so it's been a really good shakedown. It's been a good chance to get to know all the boards again and see how the newcomers fit into the existing lineup. So let's make a start. When I talk to people about boards, it's important to put them in context of just how much power their typical riding is going to need. It can be a very different story between riders. Some riders like a more dexterous and low power approach, and others, and I'm guilty of this, like to go and carry as much power around with them as you can for a really good boosting session. So here they are in order of power consumption, starting with Villion. After riding this in light winds, you forget just how early modern twin tips can go. And then we've got the Monk, super efficient and tactile, a board that loves to play in medium power conditions. Then the Ronson, square outline, its need for juice giving it a bit more bite at higher loadings. Then the Absinthe, more or less the same as the Ronson. It's lighter and has a bit more dynamic flex response, so even though the outline is more curved, it's very close to the Ronson, but giving easier control when it's windy. Lastly, the ADHD. This is the gas guzzler of the range, the longest board, so the highest final tip rocker, and the most curved outline. On from and related to this power requirement, let's have a quick chat about channels. Now if you notice, the Villion goes first and it has no channels. Then the Monk goes next with smaller ridges. And then the channel boards start to go. Channels do help boards, what I like to call dig their own rails. And this has a very big effect on how efficient the boards are and how they deal with power at high loadings. So let's have a look at channels. When the water flows over them, or flows over the board, it kind of goes in a fan. And in the center of the board, more so across than down the board. Firstly, it enters the heel side edge. You get a low pressure point here that helps the rail penetrate a bit deeper. And at the top, the deflection on this channel pushes the water off at an angle, and that creates a force which pushes the toe side edge up more, and thus helps you angle the board a bit more and really bury that heel side rail. I'm sure you've felt that with many boards, when they get overpowered, you need to have to curl your toes up and flex your ankles and force your heels down all the time to keep control. Now this can be really tiresome, and one of the reasons why many boards top out. Plus, everyone has a different flexibility level in their ankles. Mine is terrible. You simply can't keep them edging when you get overpowered. Now channels massively help with this. Yet this helps to explain, especially with the more rounded outline, just why the Absinthe and the ADHD are just so effortless to ride at high power levels. The cost of this is efficiency though, problematic at lower power levels. So, in this vein, what's the easiest board to ride with lots of power? Well, it's the ADHD, but I would argue just as easy as the Absinthe. It may not have the last few percentage points of crazy grip, but it's really close, and both of these boards can, if it's important to you, be ridden with high power levels for far longer than a lot of the other boards in the range. The Ronson is next, and you can boost the Ronson by putting full boot bindings on it. Then the Monk and the Villion. Now I'm going to talk to you about tactility. It's an odd thing to quantify, but some decks can do amazing things without really telling you much about what's going on. You're more a passenger than a pilot. Interestingly, the board that feeds back the least is the ADHD. It'll take all the power you can throw at it, but it's really not that interested in letting you know what it's doing. I guess when you're super powered, you've got enough on your plate anyway. As to the rest of the range, they talk a lot more. And you know, it's nice to have a bit of a chat with your board. You know how stable the grip is, how much grip it's got in reserve, how it's dealing with the speed you're asking of it for the given water state, and how stable the yaw is. Basically telling you what its limits are. So here are the two boards that stand out as the sports cars in the range, the ones that really involve you with what's going on. The Monk is king of this. It feeds so much back while still feeling soft. In onshore mush it has feel and drive and character. It's head and shoulders above everything else. Medium power levels in moving water. It's a difficult place to be. There's not a lot of power available, but the Monk, it does a fantastic job. It's a joyous place to be. Next in the line, it offers the same but much further up the power range, and it's the Absinthe. For the power it's capable of holding, ultimately, it goes pretty early and it makes you feel like you know exactly what it's up to, but it has a ton of ability past the point at which the Monk starts to complain of being pushed too hard. The Ronson is certainly the most tactile of the freestyle capable decks, even if it's quite hands-on in terms of technique. And then there is the Villion, which is crazy plush with massive efficiency, and though it may not feed masses back to the rider, it's really forgiving if your stance is out a bit, so you have to give it points for that. And now on to freestyle. Not as big a deal breaker as it used to be, but the ability to unhook and pop is still a big thing to lots of people. Now this is an easy one. If you ride powered and precise in good conditions, then the ADHD is king. That carve pop and huge loading potential will give you massive height and slack, but you have to get it right, and sometimes the conditions stop you from getting it right. But that's not to say that the ADHD is a hard deck to ride. When powered, it's the easiest deck here, but getting the carve pop right is not as easy as getting the pop right on the Ronson. The team riders love the Ronson. It's got the ability to help you land a lot more, get more consistent success, and it's revered by a lot of the best riders out there. In third place would be the Absinthe. But while it'll do it, remember, it's only the ADHD and the Ronson that have the central 6-inch inserts designed for bindings. Well, the Monkette also has them, but that's for way lighter riders. And on to freeride. Now, I'm not really sure what the word means anymore. It's enduro, it's big air, it's freeride, basically riding to a good standard, but always hooked in. Now, king of this at medium and high power levels is the Absinthe. It's lovely to ride powered, and the carving is just sublime. King of low to medium powers is most definitely still the Monk. It's just so engaging and so fun a place to be. The Ronson is in there with a shout too, but it trails behind the Absinthe in ease and fun factor, especially in carving. The Villion has more drive at really low power levels, and it will take the same amount of power as the Monk, and it will not quite give as much feedback as the Monk does. Interestingly, the ADHD is a really easy board to ride for freeride, if you give it enough juice, that is, but perhaps it's a bit less practical than the others. Experience. How technical are these things to ride? How technical a rider are you? For sure there's always someone better, and honestly I'm not that technical, so I tend to gravitate towards the easier boards. But if I were to rank these boards as least to most technical, the easiest to ride would be the Villion. Next would controversially be the Absinthe. After that, the Monk, then ADHD, and then Ronson. Ronson is for sure the most technical, and I think the ADHD is trickier in that you need power for it, and that ups the difficulty level, whereas the Ronson is the board that really appreciates a good rider but really rewards you when you get it singing. So there we are. Is there one board that generally keeps cropping up? Well, I've tried to present this in a way that's fair, balanced and factual, but last year I did say that of all the sessions I had, it was the Monk that left me with the biggest smile. If we had more onshore and light conditions, I think that would have been true again, but the extra wind and big air we had made things trickier for the Monk and gave the other channel boards an easier time. That's not to say that the Monk is off the pace, it's still class leading at what it does. But this year, in my mind, there was one new board that took massive slices out of all the others. It took the top end stability and ease under power of the ADHD, took the tactility, fun and lightness of the Monk, albeit at moderately higher power levels, and it took the ease of the Villion for the intermediate. But it also added a beautiful and easy nature with it, a progressive, grippy and stable carve that was both unique and addictive. It's the Absinthe. It's a new deck for this year, and it may well prove to be his biggest hit so far. I absolutely love it, and I predict it's going to do really, really well. This year I would slice up the mainstream sales of the range between the Monk, if you don't want to deal with the highest power levels, and the Absinthe if you do. For my riding style, ability, the Absinthe is certainly, in my opinion, one of the finest boards he's ever made. So there you go. Pick a windy day and go and try something. If it's not windy, this side. If it is windy, that side. And that's all. Thanks for watching, and I wish you plenty of epic sessions in the year ahead.